The new committee will take office automatically tomorrow, the 11th day after the election. I think I'd also like to thank the interpreters back there, and I'm going to try and not break a promise. This is the last time I'll be addressing you guys, so I'll try and not break a promise I've broken every time to speak slower, because they kind of complain to me every time, so I'll really make an extra effort at this point. But the first thing we would need to do is approve the order of business. What?
There's a question.
See. I think there's a question. Correct. We don't need to adopt it. You're absolutely right. So we'll go through, present the work we've done over the past year, and proceed with the reports of the committees. So the annual report is broken up into three sections. It's A is activities and areas of concern. The second section is the reports of the joint committees on which there is staff association representation. And last are some other activities that we thought it relevant to highlight. So the first area of concern was something that took up a large portion of our time in the first few months after we took office, and it's the ongoing discussions of or proposals to modify the general standards, particularly Chapter 3 that deals with personnel. So we have informed everyone through staff news a few times about the status of those discussions in the framework of the CAP. And there was a process where we met with several permanent missions to impress upon them the importance of staff input and staff rights being taken into account or included in the equation when discussing these modifications. And we were able to have active participation in the CAP working group to discuss all those issues, present the staff association's point of view. We also put together or came up with a joint proposal working closely with the legal department and with human resources that wasn't the greatest proposal of all, but it did certainly protect our acquired rights and our contractual rights in the process. So the status now is there was sort of a break. They weren't able to adopt it for the General Assembly last year or the special one last October, nor for this year's General Assembly in Paraguay. As it stands now, they're going to resume discussing it in the framework of the CAP, and it'll be the negotiation stage where the countries actually go, from what I understand, point by point and seek to adopt the changes, whatever version or form it takes at the special General Assembly this year. So that's something the next committee will have to watch closely, because I imagine that's something that's going to resume. It's imminent that it will resume that process. Another area that has taken a lot of time has been representation of staff interests. We've had a lot of consultations, dozens and dozens of consultations from different staff members on a wide range of issues. In recent months, we've had several harassment complaints that have been formalized, both workplace harassment and sexual harassment cases. And what we realized, and one of the first things we asked Human Resources for, was training to be provided for everyone in the Secretariat. I think the members of the committee, we realized we had never received this training, and apparently the only people who had were previous harassment investigators and advisors. At the moment, actually next door, Human Resources, I think with an outside consultant, is training all of the harassment advisors and investigators now. They're in the room receiving that training, which will go on today, and I think half day tomorrow as well. We also met with Human Resources on the same issue of the harassment claims, with a view to looking at how those rules need to be updated. So the sexual harassment policy is over a decade old. The workplace harassment policy is about 10 years old. And Human Resources agreed that it was probably a fitting time to review it. There was a lot of expertise in the Secretariat, in the Commission on Women, the Human Rights Commission, with staff members willing to lend a hand and lend their expertise. We had a commitment in that meeting with Human Resources that they would provide training, provide training to all the Secretariat this year on these issues in the second half of this year, as well as form a committee which would draw upon the talents of staff members in the Secretariat. So staff committee, SIM, and the CDH, for the purpose of looking and seeing whether those policies, those memorandums, executive orders on harassment need to be reviewed and updated and possibly modified. Another issue for the incoming committee to look at closely. Another couple issues that we've looked at were strategic vision and management modernization. These processes have also been ongoing since last year, and they kind of slowed down towards the early part of this year. Last Friday, there was a meeting on strategic vision, so that process is starting up again. One of the things we looked at, we kind of determined was the most fitting stage for the staff association to provide input on these issues wasn't in the stage really of defining the pillars and the priorities of the organization, but in the next stages, which are going to be human resources modernization, management modernization. And there's a consultant, Julian Murray, who I'm sure many of you have met with. He met with the staff committee, he met with different administrative officers, directors, secretaries, sort of all segments of the OAS, or the secretariat, to try and, I think, gain a better understanding of how things work and how a lot of things don't work here. And late last week, he submitted his results of his survey that he submitted, and a presentation that I think will be given to the CAP tomorrow with his proposals. That's available for everyone to look at. I would suggest looking at it. There are a lot of different options in there, and it remains to be seen how the Secretariat will take that input and what form the eventual proposal for management modernization will take. But similar to other issues, the idea on these areas was for the countries to adopt something substantive on these at the Special General Assembly this year. So that's another two topics that are kind of ongoing that will continue throughout the summer and the fall. Another big area, it started shortly after our term started, and it's kind of there isolated cases that pop up here and there. Last year, towards the end of the year, we were informed that several staff members, particularly national offices, were informed that their, in some cases, long-term contracts, in a couple or at least one case, their continuing contract would be terminated at the end of the year. Of course, we're very concerned about this. It's not the first time that continuing contracts are terminated or have been terminated in recent years, notwithstanding the fact that these contracts are supposed to replace the career service and really should only be terminated if the post is completely abolished or for cause, some wrongdoing on the part of the staff member. The concern arises, especially in the case of the national offices and what we call kind of conversion of staff contractors. Most of these individuals, particularly in the national offices, are still providing similar or very, very similar services to the Secretariat as they provided as staff or continuing contract holders, except that now they're CPRs with a lesser salary, no benefits, no insurance, nothing at all. So that is a particularly troubling trend that we hope won't continue. And we did request a meeting when this came up in December with the Secretary General to see what options there might be to sort of minimize the impact of these terminations on the affected staff members. Initially, there was agreement with the Secretary General, from the Secretary General, that this could have been done in a better way, and he tasked us to work with the administration to see what options could be found. Unfortunately, after a few months of going back and forth, no real change to the initial decision was made, and all of those affected staff members' contracts were terminated, and they're now, the majority of them are performing under CPRs. I don't know what to really say about that. I mean, it's something that really is kind of disastrous if it continues, if it expands. It's horrible for those staff members, particularly if you have a continuing contract and it's terminated. In other cases, at least one other case, another continuing contract was terminated, and that function in the national office definitely will continue. It's a country representative that was eliminated last year. So that's something, another area for the upcoming committee to really pay close attention to safeguard all of our rights. Kind of tied to conversion of staff contracts to CPRs, and looking at the large number of CPRs that we have in the Secretariat. There are approximately 300 CPRs, a lot of them natural CPRs. We did some research into how CPRs and consultants in other organizations in the area are similar to ours, and bigger than ours in most cases also, how they incorporate or to what extent CPRs are allowed to have membership in those associations, whether as associate members or some sort of membership. So we looked at the UN, IMF, World Bank, IDB, about 5 or 6 organizations, and it's sort of a little different all over the map on what those organizations allow. We also sent out a survey to staff members and CPRs to try and gauge what people thought about the possibility of of CPRs joining the association in some form. And I think that one of the things we found was there was a perception, at least among some CPRs, that it was a choice that the Staff Association was making not to invite them to join the association. And I think one of the things that we tried to highlight, we had an informative session in May to, among other things, inform of the survey results, and to also make it clear that a change in that fashion to allow CPR membership, it's prohibited at this, it's not contemplated in existing rules, but a change in that sense would require many areas to be changed. The statutes of the association would have to change, which would require approval of the Assembly of Staff as well as the Secretary General. The general standards would also need to be modified, which requires only countries can change those standards. So it seemed like a daunting, if not impossible, thing to really consider. And truly, I think what a lot of staff members and the consultants that came to that session really realized and responded to the survey realized was that the problem isn't whether or not CPRs can or cannot join the association here. The problem is the overuse, misuse, and abuse of CPR contracts, where a lot of CPRs are performing permanent or recurring staff functions and really shouldn't be hired indefinitely with the perennial breaks in service as CPRs with lesser benefits as staff members. I think also another area that kind of occupied a lot of attention was competitions for long-term contracts and the continuing contract process. So over the past year, since August last year, there have been approximately 69 competitions that were seen by the Advisory Committee on Selection and Promotion. And I'd like to thank Ambassador Ramdin, who's joined us and who chairs that committee, for making himself available for all those cases to be viewed and processed by the committee. At the same time, the pace of those competitions has slowed significantly from last year to now. I'd say probably 75% of those 69 or so cases that were seen by the committee took place before December or by December, roughly, or maybe 65%. The remainder, less than half, took place this year in the past 4 or 5 months. So we would strongly urge Human Resources to once again speed up the pace of competitions that go to the selection committee. Just to recall, they had to hire an external consultant to help process the backlog of competitions. And there have been very few new competitions that have been coming out and being processed by the selection committee. So unless steps are taken to once again regularize the pace of competitions, we're getting back to a situation where we're going to have a tremendous backlog of competitions, where people are waiting on short-term contracts to get a Series B for way longer than they should. And that's something else that needs to be addressed. In terms of the continuing contract process, since taking office, we've been pushing the administration to open that process. First, to publish the list of eligible staff members as the rules require, which was done, I believe, in February. That list was finally published, an updated list. And then secondly, for the competition process to be open, the rules provide that if we're under a certain target threshold, the Secretariat should open the process and allow additional staff members to enter continuing contracts. And last week, Human Resources, I think it was last week, finally notified that in October, that process will begin, and they published another updated list. So we look forward to seeing some more staff members enter that more secure form of contract in October when that opens. I'm sure the incoming staff committee will stay on top of that issue as well. Won't go into much details, but throughout the year, you've seen several bulletins we've put out, staff news that we've put out, trying to inform on all of the topics we've kind of discussed up till now, with exception probably of the harassment and the need for training on harassment, which is something that's been a recent development. And the meeting with Human Resources on that just took place a couple of weeks ago. But everything else has been communicated or is kind of gathered here in this report. We've continued having meetings and relationships with representatives of member states on various issues of concern to staff members, starting with the changes to the general standards. We had at least 10 courtesy visits with permanent representatives here, as well as several informal meetings with different delegations to try and gain support for hearing of the staff's voices or voice in the deliberative bodies of the OAS. A couple of their issues I would touch upon briefly coordination with other staff associations. And with FICSA, we had a lunch early on in the term with president of FICSA and with other presidents of staff associations in the area. And recently, a few weeks ago, the monthly or bi-monthly lunches of staff associations was resumed, and that was with the IMF, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. And then finally, actions of this staff committee with the General Secretariat, sent numerous communications, had numerous meetings with different officials of the Secretariat, the Chief of Staff, the Secretary General, the Assistant Secretary General, the former Secretary for Administration and Finance, and the current Secretary for Administration and Finance, on really a myriad of issues. And that's briefly touched upon in the annual report, which you probably have in front of you. The second area of the annual report are the reports of the joint committees and working groups on which the staff association has representation. I won't go into a lot of the details here. I'll touch upon maybe a couple of the highlights. So on the parking fund, there was no increase in the premiums for 2013. The medical benefits trust fund, from 2013 to 2014, it had a positive return of 16.1%, so that seems to be in a healthy state. The Joint Insurance Committee was a 6% increase in premiums for 2013, and a 5% increase in premiums is recommended for 2014. In terms of the Reconsideration Committee, there were 3 cases presented to the committee over the past year, which resulted in reports, including recommendations to the Secretary General. There were no cases submitted to the Disciplinary Committee over the past year. And the Performance Evaluation Review Committee met in February to issue recommendations on what to do with, or how to proceed in the cases of all those staff members who have not completed this phase of the performance evaluation cycle. So from what they've informed, everyone has been given an extension, but I would remind everyone of the importance of completing that process. Your step increases hinge upon it, and the only way to really measure for things to improve is for us to have a functioning performance evaluation system. A few other activities that also should be mentioned: Leo Fund loans over the past year. The amount lent out has been a little less than last year. It was about 98,000. Last year was a little over 100,000. And Lena has asked to remind everyone that Lena Seviano of the availability of rural fund loans for you and your family's educational needs. The rates are extremely low, and they're competitive with other loans you can obtain elsewhere. We also had the staff award ceremony and gave the Terry Woods Award in December last year to Rosana Martinelli from SETI. Probably tied to the staff incentive awards, we also received a request from Human Resources last year. The way of determining outstanding performance awards, there are rules on it now where it's not just designated by directors. There's supposed to be a committee that will evaluate and determine awards. Late last year, the Human Resources requested, since that committee had not been appointed, for us to use the same procedure as last year. Since the end of the year was upon us, we agreed to that request on the condition and on the basis that this year, Human Resources would take the steps to ensure that that committee is appointed and could perform its functions as the rules contemplate. So we imagine that for that to take place, Human Resources would have to start that process and appoint that committee as soon as possible. In terms of new benefits for members, we expanded upon the language classes that were offered last year. We offered language classes, introductory classes for Portuguese, Spanish, and English. I think we were able to carry out over this year 3 different courses for Portuguese, or two were completed, one's ongoing, and an introductory business English class has finished, and I think another one is still ongoing. I think we haven't met the minimum number of staff members to organize and carry out the Spanish language introductory classes. Also, we had several meetings with a law firm called Bretton Woods Law. They specialize in the law of international organizations, particularly labor law. There's always a shortage of attorneys that really understand how the internal grievance processes in our type of organizations work, and how to fight cases in the tribunal if it goes that far. They've offered their services. We were trying to organize a town hall meeting with them in the winter, but when they're headquartered in London, although they have attorneys all over. When they were here in the winter, we wanted to have a meeting with them, but a town hall meeting, as I said, but weather kind of interfered, and I think the OS was closed the day we planned to have it, so we weren't able to do that. The materials that they provided, their contact information is available in the Staff Association offices. So I'd encourage you all, if you're interested or need some sort of advice, you can go to the office and get that contact information. In terms of recreational activities of interest, I won't go through them. The kind of new, kind of fun event that we kind of added this year to kind of be a stress reliever was the spring barbecue. I think was very well received. We were able to do it, I'd say, very economically. We had some other savings throughout the year. The Christmas party, the children's Christmas party in December, cost far less, thanks to Patricia and Tamara's efforts, and Alicia, who's no longer with us, but it ended up costing far less, and that money was able to be put towards other activities just to sort of bring us together and increase camaraderie among us. Finally, as you all know, Alicia Pita, who was the staff administrator for, I think, almost 7 years, left at the end of the year. And so in January, we hired Tamara Garicoche, whom a lot of you probably know, as first a part-time CPR, then a full-time CPR for a couple of months. But again, going back to what you mentioned before in terms of that staff functions, permanent staff functions should be performed by staff members, we endeavored to hire her as a staff member. We had a little push from Human Resources that they wanted us to use the call for resumes process that you've all seen. But for the past, I'd say, 3 years since that process started, the Staff Association has objected on the basis that it's not contemplated within the rules. And so we objected to being forced to use a call for resumes process that the Staff Association did not agree to in principle. Finally, we had to request an exception, not to the rules, but to the call for resume policy in order to hire Tamara, which was granted. That exception was granted. And we made it clear that, okay, we're going to hire her in accordance with the rules, pending if Human Resources at some point allows the Staff Association to hold a regular competition, which we tried to do with Tamara, but Tamara was with Alicia before her, but Alicia was on short-term contracts for the entire time she was here, maybe CPR at the beginning, but probably 5 years on short-term contracts. So we hope that at some point the Staff Association will be able to hold a competition for this post and regularize the post. Next up will be the Treasurer's Report. I don't know if anyone had any questions on any of the issues that we've gone over up till now. Oh? Yeah, please, Hillary.
Just one quick question, Mr. President.
Maybe you should use a microphone so they can.
We have some webcasts going for the national offices, so if you could use a mic so they can hear. Thanks.
Okay, we got it. Okay, yes, Mr. President. I was a little concerned, with respect to your report on the strategic vision of the OAS, in which you said the committee determined that one of the best ways for the association to contribute to the process was not in the stage of defining the priorities of the OAS. What's the reasoning behind that? Because I would think that when it comes to defining the priorities of the OAS, I can think of almost no better aggregation of persons and staff to be part of that process of shaping the priorities. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Hillary. I'd say we had a lot of discussion about this, and I'll tell you what my personal viewpoint was, and I think the committee, to a certain extent, shared it as well. I'm in Secretariat for Legal Affairs. As a lawyer there, I can't determine what the priorities for the Secretariat of Legal Affairs should be. I think that's something for my secretary and senior staff members in the administration to define. I think that was the approach, and I met with Ambassador Rabasa of Mexico to determine ways, and what he had informed at the time was the countries were negotiating it. They were doing different studies early on, and that he said, of course, if you have some input that you would like to provide, you can do that. Now, to go back, we hadn't really looked a whole lot at this issue prior to the informative session we held in November last year, when staff members requested that we see a way to provide input on this topic. After the meeting with Ambassador Bassa, we met with the committee several times to sort of discuss this. And that was the conclusion, that at this stage they were defining the pillars of the organization, the strategic priorities, what were going to be the 4 or 5 important areas. And I think another thing that's important to mention is, if someone from one secretariat everyone is going to determine or going to feel that their secretariat is a priority, and that their particular project that they work on is a priority. So it sort of pits staff member against staff member in determining how can the staff association say this is a priority and this is not. I think the project and the activities the OAS carries out are mandates from the countries, and the countries need to determine that. So it's sort of to move forward, the idea was, when the priorities are determined and it comes time to then transform those to modernize human resources, for example, to change the structure of the OAS, which is being discussed as well, that is something where the staff association is in more of a position, I think, objectively, to provide more and more substantive input. And I think, I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that. No. Thanks. Any other questions? Yes, Patty.
Hi, good morning. When it comes to the performance evaluation meeting, outstanding performance evaluation award, for example, did we ever get a response on why we had to stop using what was mandated, the process to give an award, and how come that we didn't observe it for 2 years and now we're trying to regain that momentum that we lost of a system that was well thought and applied? Did they ever give us an answer why did it just all of a sudden we didn't follow that system? And it was just the award was given at the discretion of the director?
Yeah, the reason that was given was that Human Resources had not taken the steps to appoint the committee that would look at and examine the awards and look at incentives for staff. And it was shortly before the date for the staff awards in December, a couple weeks before, maybe it was 2 or 3 weeks before. Human Resources said, okay, we want to have the staff awards, you've requested we have the staff awards, but we haven't appointed the committee yet. And there's no time before the awards in 2 or 3 weeks to appoint the committee. Can we proceed with the same mechanism that was used last year and the year before, with the idea that next year they would take the appropriate steps to follow the rules that we have on it now?
Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Any other questions? Okay, Jan?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jan Astefan, and I served as the treasurer in the 2013-2014 period. Right now, I'm going to make this speech extremely short. I don't know if that is a good thing or a bad thing for most of y'all. I do understand that accounting can be considered very boring for most of us, unless we're the ones spending the money. Thank you. During this situation, I'll be discussing our budget, our financial situation on our budget during the period of my management between August 2013 to June 2014, and statement of changes to the bank statements. During that period, we received an increase on all balances on our accounts. The operational account increased by $32,118, the gift shop $7,535, and all accounts $1,198. During the 2013-2014 budget period, a deficit was initially projected, and because of that, we had to go through a lot of cutting of costs in order to streamline the budget. We had to also streamline to meet changes in what we felt was staff needs, concentrating more on staff activities and doing those sort of functions. Because of a change in the staff administrator for that period, we experienced a surplus of cash from just that one particular line item alone. Because of that, that surplus was used to have the spring barbecue and any other staff activities that was needed. To be honest, that is really it. I'm not going to list the duties and functions of the treasurer. I'm not going to list the staff rules. I think that is kind of boring. So, if you have any question concerning these accounts, I'll be more than willing to answer them.
Thank you, Ann. If there are no questions on the... Hilaire, a question on the treasurer's report?
Sorry, I know I'm not an accountant, I'm a lawyer, but I just want to get an idea. I mean, usually isn't there reflected in statements something about assets and liabilities? I mean, what are current assets as opposed to current accounts? I'm just clarifying.
There are various banks' financial statements that can be used. Usually you have your budget, which usually states what we estimate for the year versus what was actually spent. I can ask Tamara, can you click the tab for budget, please? Oh, sorry, the tab budget. In the budget, that will actually list what full details on all expenditures we were anticipating for the year, all our sources of income, and from that, we would make financial decisions based on if we can do any activities. The statement of changes is simply listing our bank statements, meaning the beginning balance during the period that I started, whatever increase, transfers out, or expenditures that took place, and actually the net balance as of the June 30th period. If I had to list the balance sheet would simply just state our cash, whatever assets we own, which would have been the computers, the desk, the equipment, and liabilities, but most times we do not incur these sort of liabilities because right now we're running on the same cash basis accounting that the administration runs on. So for you to run accrual methods, we have to also start estimating the debt that we are expecting to incur, and that probably could be liabilities related to hiring a staff and stuff. Okay?
Thanks, Jan. Any other questions on the treasurer's report? Okay. Next will be the report of the representative to the Retirement and Pension Committee. Beverly?
Good morning, everyone. I just saw Ambassador Ramden, but I think he's gone. Ambassador Albert Ramden, participants of the OAS Retirement and Pension Fund and the Provident Plan, colleagues of the Staff Association, staff of the General Secretariat, welcome. On May 2nd, 1928, the OAS Retirement and Pension Fund was created for OAS staff members. During the years, employees of other organizations, namely the Inter-American Defense Board, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, the Inter-American Institute of Cooperation and Agriculture, and the Tropical Agricultural Research and Higher Education Center have also joined the fund. This year, we celebrated 86 years of a healthy, stable fund that has provided pension and retirement benefits and basic protection against disability and premature death by covering qualified beneficiaries in 35 countries. Those of us who left our home countries to dedicate a career to this institution and do not belong to our national security systems rely completely on the OAS Retirement and Pension Fund. The Retirement and Pension Fund Committee is comprised of the chair, who represents the member states, an elected staff representative, and a representative appointed by the Secretary General. Each of these principals has an alternate representative. There is also representation from the Association of Retirees and a legal advisor, and we are all guided by the diligence and thoroughness of the Secretary-Treasurer of the Fund, Mr. Daniel Villarino. On Wednesday, June 18, 2014, at a meeting of the Permanent Council, Ambassador Neil Parsan, Permanent Representative of Trinidad and Tobago, was elected by acclamation to the position of Chair of the Committee. The health of our fund is measured by several factors. The last actuarial valuation report indicates that the fund has a contingent surplus. The asset liability actuarial study submitted by external independent actuaries shows that the fund has a funded ratio of 104.4%. The external auditor's report confirmed the stability of the plan. This year, we were met with several challenges of misinformation, and the Staff Association newsletters, important information regarding the OAS retirement and pension plan, published on April 22nd, and the report of the Chair of the Retirement and Pension Committee to the Permanent Council, presented by Ambassador Gillian Bristol on April 17, 2013, and approved in the session of the Permanent Council on April 23, 2014, was also published on May 29, 2014, and they sought to offer clarification on several important issues. In 2013, the OAS Retirement and Pension Fund Committee approved 5% for the first semester and 7% for the second semester accreditation to the participants' accounts. The fund has a very specific guideline as to how accreditations must be approached, a guideline based on our asset liability studies to ensure that the fund has a very high probability of maintaining a fully funded status. This guideline gives an indication every semester on what portion of the fund's returns should be used for accreditation of interest to the participants' accounts and what portion should be used to strengthen the fund's general reserve. In the coming week, the committee will consider the informative document, Analysis of the Fund's Situation in Preparation for the Interest Rate Accreditation to Participants' Accounts in the Retirement and Pension Plan and the Provident Plan for the first semester of 2014. Participants will be notified shortly after a thorough review and a judicious decision. Still a cause for concern is the 401M plan created in 1999 with the limited objective of serving a relatively small number and category of temporary professional staff members. The 401M plan now has approximately 124 participants, of which 97 have been participating for more than 2 years. Several actuarial studies conducted by independent external consultants have concluded that the increased participation in the 401M plan and the resultant reduction in OAS retirement and pension plan membership have caused a decrease in the plan's actuarial surplus, which is negatively affecting the actuarial health of the plan. The committee, as fiduciaries of the Retirement and Pension Fund, will continue to address this issue to ensure that the fund remains both financially and actuarially sound so that it is able to satisfy obligations to participants under the plan. To the participants, we would like to reaffirm that as your representatives, we are always available to answer any questions or concerns that you might have. The same is true of the committee in general and the Secretariat of the Fund. To non-participants, we invite you to consider the OAS Retirement and Pension Plan. We encourage you to approach us, as well as the Secretary-Treasurer, Mr. Daniel Villarino, to explore the options and gain credible information on eligibility. We urge you to join us. I would like to personally thank Daniel Villarino, the Secretary-Treasurer, and his staff, Ms. Margarita Riva, alternate representative of the Permanent Mission of the United States and until recently acting chair of the committee, Ms. Carla Sorani, my alternate representative, Mr. Abram Stein, the principal representative of the Secretary General, and his alternate, Mr. Rodrigo Torres, Mr. William Berenson, our legal advisor, and Mr. Eloy Mestre and Mr. Herman Zinke, Aspen representatives for the dedication to the task at hand. On behalf of Carla Serrani, outgoing alternate staff representative to the OAS Retirement and Pension Fund, and on my own behalf, we thank you for your trust, and I look forward to working with Luis Marcelo Acevedo as we continue to serve you over the next year in our capacity as your elective staff representatives with trust, confidentiality, and integrity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bev. Any questions?
Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. Actually, it's quite interesting and very valuable for us to know. I think one element that a lot of people don't understand is that the pension fund actually has some other partner institutions, and the employees of that partner institutions contributing to the pension fund. Maybe at some point in time in the upcoming year, you can give us a kind of a head count on the individuals that are affiliated to the commission of the pension fund of the OAS, so we can understand that it's not only fed by employees of the organization as it is seen maybe by some people. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. And just to answer the question, as Beverly said in her report, there are other 4 institutions that participate in the OAS Retirement and Pension Plan. ICA has approximately 70 participants. The Institute for Agronomical Research and Higher Education, CATIE, has about 12 participants. The Inter-American Defense Board, I believe, are 6 or 7, and also around, I think we have like 8 for the Inter-American Court in Human Rights. So basically those are people who also participate in our plan. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay. I think very briefly in terms of pending matters, I won't go through it, but it's sort of the issues that we went through over early on. I kind of highlighted the ones that were continuing, so the general standard, strategic vision, management modernization, a series of issues. I think we can go on to the report of the nominating committee, but prior to that, I would really thank all the staff members that were willing to run. It takes a really big time commitment to do this, and everyone that's willing to put their name out there. Congratulations to those who won and those who didn't. Marilena, I'd like to invite you to do the report of the nominating committee, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I will try to speak in one language. Sometimes my brain doesn't work that way. This report is going to be, as well, very brief. I was invited with our team of the nominating committee to form this committee by mid-May. The intention of this committee is basically to set up the elections, the elections for Staff Association and for the Commission of the Pension Funds. We basically got together by mid-May to establish our work system and how we are going to establish the elections for this year. The system and the mechanisms that we actually use are basically the same that we use in a yearly basis. Some individuals are always contributing, helping us, and supporting us in giving us the guidances to kind of continue with the same standards or improving the process of election every single year. So I am not going to stop in details, but it is a serial of meetings that happen towards this basically 2-month period where 7 of us will get together in several opportunities to first try to establish and identify the individuals who are interested in becoming our representative for both the Staff Association or for the Commission of the Pension Fund. After the identification of them is basically putting together the profiles of each one of them, if possible in both languages, and posting them, making sure that each one of them has the capacity and, well, at least is sort of has the, all the green lights to be part of this election. And after that, identifying what I think is one of the strongest part of this committee, and is finding 45 individuals from the institution that will help us throughout the election. One group is the nomination committee. The second one would be the tables that are set in both buildings, the administrative building and the general secretariat building, for which 16 individuals are going to be rotating the day of the election. And later on, the Comité de Escrutinio, conformed by 6 other individuals who will receive the amphoras from every single part, either the absent votes, the OAS out of the countries, other institution votes, in every single one, separating from Commission of Pension Fund and Staff Association. So for this year, I wanted to thank the 45 individuals, I think I am included, so 44, of which 28 of them were females. I always keep the record on desegregating, as I was trained by the SIM. 17 of them were males, and actually we are sort of trying to invite as well in this type of exercise more participation of males in the volunteering processes, because actually this is kind of a sort of evidence that females are more willing to help for free. Well, about the election in itself, I think it was important for this year due to the reduction on the number of individuals who voted with respect to last year. And I will write that numbers, because I will say that numbers because it's easier. Last year, the election for personnel, the staff committee, was 409 individuals voted last year, regardless of, if it was in headquarters or out. So 409, and this year was 335. So having an 18% reduction in voters, we went through the effort to see what is the percentage of representativity within the OAS, as OAS personnel. And we learned that the 335 that voted this year represent near 60% of the staff. So we, this year, with 335 individuals voting, representing the 60% of the population of the staff. So we have a very strong representation, at least in the votes. So far, we try to keep it in just headquarters and out of headquarters to make it more simple to be read in the charts. I hope Tamara is going to help us posting this report in full in the Staff Association, just in case you need some additional information. The way we have worked this year, we have split in different hands the responsibility of receiving those boxes with the votes in some way to not overload one individual, given the fact that we are several of us working in different functions and there is a due date and a very short time to perform, and we don't want to confuse teams voting out of the countries and with absence votes and GSB and admin. So basically, we were 4 individuals receiving votes for absent or for the day of the elections, receiving the amphoras in itself. As for the pension fund, there is a sort of replica of the Staff Association. There was a reduction as well in the number of voters. We didn't produce that representation of votes in percentage with the number of individuals, but we can go after in a few days and provide that information and enrich the report. So we have pretty much the same chart. My feeling is that it will be close to 60% as well as in the case of the Staff Association. So far from the gender perspective, these 335 individuals, as always, females are much more engaged with the electoral process as well, representing 201 individuals of the 335 in front of 134 males that were voting. So the reduction of voters was more reflected in males than in females, but in both cases it was a reduction. So arriving to the results. For this year we had 2 candidates for president, both of them strong candidates to my belief, and 10 individuals for members of the Staff Association. I think, I don't know if the results in the numbers are, I mean, quite evident. Carla Sorani voted as president with 190 votes. She is the one who will take place effective tomorrow. And the members of that committee will be in order of elected votes: Ms. Beatriz Santos, Ms. Teresa Bustamante, Ms. Lily Ching, Ms. Patricia Quiroz, Ms. Cecilia Martins, Mr. Jan Astafan, and Mr. Juan Cruz Monticelli. Having as an alternate Ms. Sheila Carvalho and Ms. Mariah Hines. I think, Mariah, this is the first year for you to apply, as well as for Ms. Lily Ching. So we congratulate you and welcome the new individuals who actually offer to be part of this and to become our new leaders. Passing to the Pension Fund Commission, we had only 1 candidate for president and only 1 candidate for what is it, suplente? Oh my God. Alternate. I think everybody's so happy with Miss Wharton Lake, and nobody wants her out of there, that is for sure. She had 299 votes, for which she was vastly elected. And Mr. Marcelo Acevedo with 214 votes also as an alternate. I want to just say thank you again to all the volunteers who year plus year, and especially for our representative, because this is a tremendous work to do on top of our work, to be able and to be diligent to support and help our staff members, especially when difficult times are in front of us. The only one recommendation that I would give to the upcoming committee is to take all the other recommendations that were made in years before, but we don't want to drop that in your court like that. I would recommend to just identify a group of experts who can go and review how the electoral process can be improved, considering some changes in the statutes, particularly in giving more opportunity for privacy in the votes for national offices, to give the opportunity to evaluate if there is some economic way to go for e-vote that reduce tremendously the amount of effort that so many people do. And especially for accountability and transparency, I think that would be the good option. So I definitely would recommend a group of people. I think we have enough expertise within the last 5 years nominating committee, and they are going to be able to identify what would be the best changes in those statutes to make it easy for you to bring it up to the decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madeleine. Any questions for nominating committee? All right. Well, the last item for today is the installation of the 2014-2015 staff committee members. As we mentioned, we don't have quorum. They'll take over tomorrow, but I'd still like to invite them up here, please.